This is your final dinner in this house, my mother. Barbara smiled, her teeth gleaming under the expensive crystal chandelier. She pushed a manila folder toward my plate. I did not blink. I reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out a heavy watermarked document, and slid it right back across the mahogany table. "It is your final dinner, too," I replied. She read it once. Then she read it again. The smug smile completely vanished from her face as she gasped. "You cannot do this." "Oh, but I can," I whispered. "My name is Sydney. I am 33 years old, and as a forensic accountant, I uncover the lies people try to hide in their financial records. I never thought my biggest investigation would be my own family. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic relatives who tried to take advantage of your grief. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, our $4 million estate was always cold and unwelcoming. My father, William, was the only source of warmth in my life. He built a real estate empire from the ground up, teaching me the value of hard work, integrity, and paying attention to the fine print. My mother, Barbara, and my younger sister, Ashley, preferred the perks of his wealth without the effort. When my father passed away suddenly a few months ago, my world shattered. Tonight was supposed to be a quiet family dinner to mark the end of our official mourning period. Instead, it became a stage for my mother's ultimate betrayal. We were sitting in the formal dining room. The smell of roasted lamb and expensive red wine filled the air. My sister Ashley was busy taking photos of her designer outfit for her followers, while her husband Jamal swirled his wine glass with an air of unearned arrogance. Jamal is 32, an African-American man who constantly brags about his tech startup, a startup that ironically has not produced a single profitable product in 3 years. My mother always fawned over him, desperate to claim she had a tech visionary in the family. I had barely taken my first bite when my mother cleared her throat loudly. She tossed a cheap plastic folder onto my plate right over my food. I opened it. It was a formal eviction notice. "I am selling the house to Jamal," my mother announced casually, taking a sip of her wine. "He needs a proper headquarters for his tech company to impress his investors. Your bedroom is going to be his executive office. You have exactly 2 hours to pack your clothes and move into the detached garage." I stared at the eviction notice. The sheer audacity of her demand was staggering. My father had barely been gone a few months, and she was already trying to strip me of the only home I had ever known. And to give it to Jamal, a man who had done nothing but drain my family resources since the day he married Ashley. Ashley did not even look up from her phone. "Come on, Sydney," she sighed. "Do not make a scene. You are single. You do not need all this space. Jamal is building an empire. You just look at spreadsheets all day. Be a team player for once." Jamal chuckled, leaning back in my father's antique chair. "Look at it this way, Sydney. The garage has great lighting. Plus, my developers are going to need the entire main house to code without distractions. I will even let you use the guest bathroom if you ask nicely." The disrespect was palpable. For 15 years, my mother had made it clear I was the black sheep. I was too pragmatic, too serious, too much like my father for her taste. She wanted a daughter she could show off at country club luncheons, which she got in Ashley. She despised me because I saw through her superficial facade. She never forgave me for refusing to fund her luxury vacations with my own salary. And now she thought she could easily toss me out into the cold because she assumed she held all the power over my father's estate. What she did not know was that I had spent the last week going through my father's private filing cabinets. I did not scream. I did not cry. My profession taught me that emotion loses arguments, but documentation wins wars. The silence in the dining room was deafening as I placed the thick stack of papers next to my plate. Jamal stopped laughing. Ashley finally put her phone face down on the table. They were expecting me to beg to throw a tantrum, or to storm out in tears just like they had planned. They were not prepared for a forensic accountant who knew exactly how to read a legal trust. I took a slow sip of my water, preparing to deliver the first blow to their carefully constructed illusion of control. Jamal broke the silence first. He let out a loud, theatrical sigh and leaned across the table, the scent of his expensive designer cologne filling the space between us. It was a fragrance my father had unknowingly paid for. "Look, Sydney, we understand this is a transition for you," he said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "But let us be real here. You have a glorified calculator job for people with no real ambition. You sit in a cubicle and look at receipts all day. I am a tech CEO. I am building a platform that will disrupt the entire industry. My investors expect a certain image. Having my headquarters in a $4 million estate shows them I am a visionary. You taking the master suite just to organize spreadsheets is a massive waste of square footage." He looked around the opulent room, gesturing to the high ceilings and the expensive art on the walls as if he already owned them. "My company needs this space to thrive," he continued smoothly. "My developers will be working around the clock. We need the kitchen, the living areas, the pool house for brainstorming sessions. You taking the garage is honestly a favor to you. It will keep you out of our way. And let us face it, with your salary, you could never afford to maintain a property like this anyway." Ashley did not miss a beat. She finally put her phone down, fixing her gaze on me. Her eyes held that familiar mocking glint she had perfected since we were teenagers. "Jamal is right, Sydney," she chimed in, her tone sharp and dismissive. "You really need to stop being so difficult. Mom always hated how boring and rigid you are, just like Dad. You never fit in with us. You never wanted to go on the family trips to Europe, you never cared about fashion, you just wanted to study and play with numbers." "Dad is gone now," she said, her voice lacking any genuine sorrow. "You cannot hide behind his rules anymore. He is not here to protect you or praise your boring little achievements. We are the ones carrying the family legacy forward. Jamal is going to make us billions. You should be proud to give up your room for his company. Just take the garage and be grateful Mom is not throwing you out on the street completely. At least you will still have a roof over your head. Most families would not be so generous to someone who contributes absolutely nothing to the family image." Barbara nodded vigorously, taking another large sip of her wine. "Exactly," she agreed, her eyes narrowing at me. "Ashley and Jamal are the future of this family. I am doing what is best for the estate. Your father was too sentimental, always treating you like you were somehow special just because you went to some fancy business school. The real world cares about innovators like Jamal. Hand over your keys, go pack your bags, and do not make me call a moving company to throw your cheap clothes onto the driveway." I sat perfectly still. I did not clench my fists. I did not raise my voice. I did not let a single tear form in my eyes. Over the years, my profession had trained me to face hostile witnesses, aggressive corporate embezzlers, and people who lied as easily as they breathed. My family was no different from the fraudsters I investigated every single day. They were arrogant, careless, and completely blinded by their own greed. They thought my silence was submission. They thought my lack of reaction meant I was defeated. Instead of answering my mother, I reached back into my leather tote bag. I pushed aside my laptop and my forensic audit files, my fingers wrapping around the thick, heavy manila envelope I had prepared earlier that afternoon. I brought it up to the table and set it down next to my untouched dinner plate. The envelope was sealed, but I slowly undid the clasp. I pulled out a stack of high-quality legal paper. The document was dense, bound with a thick blue backing and stamped with the raised, embossed seal of the county clerk and a prominent law firm. The watermark was clearly visible under the dining room lights. It was not a simple letter. It was a binding, irrefutable legal instrument. I flattened it out on the table with deliberate slowness, making sure the bold, capitalized heading was perfectly legible to anyone sitting across from me. I looked directly into my mother's eyes, watching her impatient glare slowly turn into a look of absolute confusion. I did not say a word, letting the heavy silence do the work for me. My mother snatched the document off the mahogany table with lightning speed. Her eyes darted across the bold lettering at the top of the page. I watched her pupils dilate. The confusion on her face rapidly morphed into pure, unadulterated rage. She did not bother reading past the first paragraph. With a guttural sound of frustration, she ripped the heavy paper right down the middle. She tore it again and again until the legal document was nothing but confetti fluttering down onto her untouched plate of roasted lamb. "You think you can forge some fake legal paperwork and scare me?" she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "I am the matriarch of this family. Your father left everything to me. I have the original will locked in my safe." Before I could even explain the difference between a standard will and an irrevocable trust, she was already pulling her gold-plated smartphone from her purse. Her fingers jabbed at the screen, dialing 911. The moment the dispatcher answered, my mother's entire demeanor shifted. The aggressive, screaming woman vanished instantly, replaced by a fragile, terrified widow. "Yes, hello, please send officers immediately," she cried into the receiver, forcing her voice to tremble violently. "My estranged daughter has broken into my home. She is mentally unhinged and refusing to leave. She is throwing fake legal documents at us and screaming. I am terrified for my safety and my pregnant daughter's safety." Ashley was not pregnant, but the lie was a masterful touch to guarantee a rapid police response. My mother hung up the phone and glared at me with a triumphant smirk. The tears disappeared as quickly as they had arrived. "You are going to leave this house in handcuffs, Sydney," she spat. Jamal leaned back and laughed, shaking his head in mock pity. "You really overplayed your hand this time, Sydney. Forgery is a serious felony. My corporate lawyers will make sure you get maximum jail time for this stunt. You just dug your own grave." I sat back in my chair and took another sip of my water. I did not point out that tearing up a physical copy of a registered county document was like tearing up a photograph of the sun and expecting it to get dark. Let them dig their graves. My profession requires absolute patience. Fraudsters always expose themselves when they think they are in control. Within 10 minutes, the flashing red and blue lights of 2 squad cars illuminated the dining room windows, painting the walls in frantic colors. Heavy footsteps pounded against the front porch, and my mother rushed to the front door to let them in. 2 large police officers entered the foyer, their hands resting cautiously on their duty belts as they scanned the room for a threat. "Oh, thank God you are here," my mother sobbed, collapsing slightly against the doorframe, so Jamal had to catch her by the shoulders. "She is in the dining room. She will not leave." Jamal smoothly stepped forward, extending a firm, confident handshake to the lead officer. "Officer, thank you for coming so quickly," Jamal said, his voice practically dripping with artificial male solidarity and corporate charm. "I am Jamal, the CEO of the tech firm relocating to this property. This is my mother-in-law, Barbara. We are dealing with a very tragic family situation here tonight." The officer nodded, pulling out a small black notepad. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" "It is my sister-in-law," Sydney, Jamal explained, lowering his voice to a compassionate whisper that was intentionally loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Ever since her father passed away a few months ago, she has suffered a complete psychotic break. She has been stalking the family, refusing to accept his death. Tonight she broke in and started waving around forged wills claiming she owns the estate. She needs serious psychiatric help, but right now she is trespassing and acting aggressively. We just want her removed safely." The lead officer looked past Jamal and locked eyes with me. I was still sitting at the head of the dining table, calmly finishing my glass of water. To a trained observer, my utter lack of panic might have looked suspicious compared to the highly theatrical distress of my family members. The officer approached the table with a stern, unyielding expression. "Ma'am, I need you to stand up and step outside with us right now." The officer ordered, his tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. Ashley stood safely behind the officers, holding her phone up to record the encounter for her social media. "Say goodbye to the house, Sydney," she whispered maliciously, her eyes shining with cruel delight. "Officer, I am perfectly willing to step outside," I said, keeping my voice level and thoroughly professional. "But I strongly suggest you look at the county property tax portal before you make a false arrest." The officer frowned, resting his right hand firmly on his handcuffs. "We can discuss your delusions outside, Mom. If you do not stand up and walk out that front door right now, I will be forced to physically remove you from the premises." The tension in the room peaked, reaching a suffocating level. My mother was wiping away her fake tears with a silk napkin. Jamal was smirking with absolute victory, adjusting his designer watch. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully weaponized the police to throw me out onto the cold street. I slowly reached back into my leather tote bag. If my mother thought tearing up a courtesy copy of a legal document erased its existence, she was about to learn a very harsh lesson in property law. I pulled out my tablet, unlocked the screen, and tapped the bookmark for the official county property tax portal. The bright screen illuminated my face as I navigated to the public records database. "Officer," I said, my voice steady and cutting through the heavy silence of the dining room, "I am not having a psychotic break, nor am I trespassing. I am a forensic accountant. I deal with legal documentation and asset tracing for a living. The woman crying by the doorway is my mother, Barbara. The man standing next to her is my brother-in-law, Jamal. They have just attempted to illegally evict me from my own property." Jamal scoffed loudly, crossing his arms over his chest. "Listen to her, officer. She is completely delusional. My mother-in-law owns this estate. She inherited it when William died. We literally just finalized the paperwork for me to purchase it today." I did not look at Jamal. I kept my eyes locked on the lead officer and handed him my tablet. "I invite you to look at the official county records, officer. 5 years ago, my father William realized that his assets needed protection. He legally transferred this entire $4 million estate into an irrevocable trust. By definition, once an asset is placed into an irrevocable trust, it is permanently removed from the grantor's taxable estate. It bypasses probate court entirely." The officer took the tablet, his brow furrowing as he read the glowing screen. "My mother's name was never on the deed," I continued, enunciating every word clearly so it would echo in the silent room. "When my father passed away, the property did not go to my mother. It remained in the trust. And as you can see on the county portal, the sole legally appointed trustee with absolute control over this property is me, Sydney." Barbara stopped wiping her fake tears. Her hand froze mid-air, the silk napkin dropping to the hardwood floor. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice losing its fragile tremor. "That is a lie. Your father left everything to me. I am his wife." "You were his wife," I corrected her coldly. "But you are not the trustee. You have zero legal authority to sell this house. The sale you allegedly finalized with Jamal today is entirely fraudulent. It is a worthless piece of paper. You cannot sell something you do not own." The lead officer handed the tablet to his partner and pulled the radio from his shoulder. "Dispatch, I need a property records verification for our current location," he said into the mic. "Give me the listed owner and any trust information on file." The room descended into a suffocating silence. Ashley lowered her phone, her social media live stream forgotten as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Jamal shifted his weight nervously, his confident CEO posture deflating by the second. He looked at Barbara, his eyes wide with rising panic. "Barbara, tell me you actually had the title when you took my money," he hissed through his teeth. Barbara swallowed hard, her face draining of color. "I am his wife," she repeated weakly, as if saying it enough times would magically rewrite property law. "I have the will in my safe." "A will does not override an irrevocable trust," I stated flatly. "The trust owns the house. I control the trust." The police radio crackled to life, breaking the tension. "Dispatch to Unit 4. Property is registered to the William Family Irrevocable Trust. Sole listed trustee is Sydney. No other authorized parties on the deed." The lead officer unclipped his hand from his utility belt and let out a heavy breath. He turned away from me and looked directly at Jamal and Barbara. His expression had shifted from cautious neutrality to stern irritation. The police do not like being used as pawns in family property disputes, especially when they are lied to. "Sir, ma'am," the officer said, his voice hard and uncompromising. "The county records verify her claim. She is the legal trustee of this property. That means she is the only person who can authorize who stays and who leaves." Jamal took a step back, raising his hands defensively. "Wait a minute, officer. There has to be a mistake. I just signed a purchase agreement today. I paid a deposit. If you paid a deposit to someone who does not own the house, then you are a victim of fraud," the officer replied bluntly. "That is a civil matter you will have to take up with lawyers, but right now this is her house." The officer turned to look at my mother, whose mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mom, you called us here to report a trespasser," the officer continued. "But based on the legal documentation, the only people trespassing right now are the ones the trustee wants removed. So I'm going to ask the trustee. The officer looked at me. Mom, do you want them to leave? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had spent 15 years treating me like a burden, who had tried to throw me out into the garage on the night we were supposed to be mourning my father. I looked at Jamal, the arrogant fraud, and Ashley, the spoiled golden child. Yes, officer, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I want them off my property immediately. The officer nodded and turned back to my family. You heard her. Grab your coats. You are the ones who need to leave. For a moment, the dining room was completely silent. Then Jamal threw his head back and started laughing. It was not a nervous laugh. It was a deep, booming sound of pure arrogance echoing against the crystal chandelier above us. My mother, who had been hyperventilating and reaching out to grab the lead officer's arm, froze in confusion. Jamal reached over and gently pulled her hand back, patting her shoulder with an exaggerated display of comfort. Let it go, Barbara, Jamal said smoothly, straightening the lapels of his tailored suit. Let her have her little moment of power. If Sydney wants to play landlord, she can have the house. We do not need it anymore. He took a few slow steps toward the head of the table, looking down at me with a gaze full of absolute contempt. He rested his hands on the back of my father's antique dining chair, leaning in close enough that I could see the smug certainty in his eyes. You think you are so smart with your county records and your legal definitions? He sneered. You think you just outplayed us tonight. Keep the empty house, Sydney. But I really hope your little calculator job pays exceptionally well, because this property has a $1.5 million second mortgage on it. I kept my face entirely impassive, but internally, the gears of my mind were already spinning at maximum speed. A second mortgage of that size on an estate placed in an irrevocable trust was a massive red flag, but I let him keep talking. Fraudsters always love the sound of their own voice. That is right, Jamal chuckled, seeing that I had not responded. $1.5 million. And since we have not made a single payment on it, the bank has officially initiated foreclosure proceedings. They are sending their representatives tomorrow morning to formally seize the property and kick you to the curb. So congratulations on winning a sinking ship. The panic completely drained from my mother's face, replaced instantly by a vicious, triumphant smirk. She stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Jamal. Her eyes gleamed with the malicious joy of a predator that had successfully cornered its prey. You did not honestly think I would let your father leave me with nothing, did you? Barbara asked, her voice dripping with venom. Your father was entirely too stingy, she continued, crossing her arms. He refused to invest in Jamal's brilliant vision. He refused to give Ashley the lifestyle she deserved. He wanted to lock all his wealth away in some boring trust. So before he passed away, I took matters into my own hands. We secured a massive loan against the equity of this house to fund the tech startup. We already have the capital. The company is fully funded. We got exactly what we wanted. Ashley let out a sharp, mean laugh, picking up her phone again and aiming the camera directly at my face. She looked at me as if I was a pathetic insect. We were actually doing you a favor by offering you the garage, Sydney, she mocked. Now you are going to be legally responsible for a foreclosed property. Your pristine little credit score is going to be completely destroyed. You will not even be able to rent a cheap apartment by the time the bank is done ruining your life. I am definitely going to live stream your eviction tomorrow. Jamal checked his heavy gold watch and sighed dramatically, acting as if he was suddenly bored by my presence. Come on, ladies, Jamal said, gesturing grandly toward the front hallway. Let us go book a suite at a luxury downtown hotel for the night. We can more than afford it. Let Sydney stay here in the dark and wait for the bank to take everything away from her. He turned to the lead police officer, flashing that fake charismatic smile one more time. Officer, we will gladly leave the premises right now, Jamal said. We do not want to cause any further trouble for this poor delusional woman. She is going to have a very difficult day tomorrow when reality finally hits her. My mother walked past the dining table, pausing just long enough to lean down and whisper in my ear. You always thought you were better than us because you played by the rules. Look exactly where it got you. You have a big empty house for exactly 12 more hours, and then you will have absolutely nothing. They walked out the front door, their laughter trailing behind them into the cool night air. The police officers exchanged a look of mild pity before following them out, leaving me completely alone in the massive, silent dining room. I sat perfectly still, listening to the sound of Jamal's expensive sports car roaring out of the driveway. They thought they had left me holding a bag of inescapable debt. They thought they had orchestrated the perfect financial crime against my father. What they failed to realize was that they had just handed a forensic accountant a map directly to their buried secrets. I calmly pulled my laptop out of my bag and opened a blank spreadsheet. Tomorrow morning was going to be very interesting. The sun rose over the Chicago suburbs, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn of the estate. I had not slept a single wink. Instead, I spent the entire night at the dining room table, my laptop screen illuminating the dark room as I cross-referenced bank records, IP addresses, and digital footprints. By 7 in the morning, I had printed and bound a comprehensive forensic audit. At exactly 8:45, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway signaled the arrival of my guests. I picked up my coffee mug and walked out onto the front porch, letting the cool morning breeze hit my face. 4 vehicles pulled up. Jamal's sleek sports car led the pack, followed by my mother's luxury SUV. Behind them parked 2 conservative black sedans belonging to the regional bank. Jamal stepped out first, wearing a sharp, bespoke suit, looking every bit the triumphant tech CEO he desperately pretended to be. He adjusted his tie and smirked at me. My mother followed, wearing a dark trench coat and a pair of oversized designer sunglasses to shield her eyes from the morning glare. She looked like a woman arriving at a victory parade, ready to watch her enemy fall. But it was Ashley who truly stole the show. Before her feet even hit the pavement, she had her smartphone out, the camera already rolling. Ashley was in full performance mode. She wore an oversized beige sweater, no makeup, and her blonde hair was perfectly messy to convey deep emotional distress. She held the phone high, talking to her thousands of followers with a trembling, fragile voice. "Guys, I am so heartbroken this morning," she sniffled, wiping away a non-existent tear from her cheek. "I am standing outside my childhood home. My late father built this beautiful house with his bare hands. But my older sister Sydney has completely destroyed our family legacy. She hid massive debts from us, and now the bank is foreclosing on the property today. We tried to help her, we really did. Jamal even offered to buy the house to save it, but she was just too bitter and jealous to accept our help." Ashley turned the camera lens directly toward me as I stood calmly on the porch. "Look at her," Ashley whispered dramatically to her live audience. "She does not even care. She is just drinking her coffee while the bank takes my father's dream away. It is so toxic and abusive. Please send prayers and good energy for my family today." Jamal walked over and put a comforting arm around Ashley's shoulder, playing the role of the supportive, successful husband for the thousands of people watching online. "We will get through this, babe," he said loudly, making sure the phone's microphone picked up his deep, reassuring tone. "We will build our own empire from scratch. We do not need her negativity dragging down our brand." While Ashley continued to farm sympathy and engagement from her gullible audience, the 2 bank representatives walked up the front steps. They were dressed in stiff gray suits, holding thick manila envelopes, looking deeply uncomfortable with the impromptu social media broadcast happening on the lawn behind them. "Are you Sydney, the lead representative?" asked his voice, strictly professional and completely devoid of warmth. I nodded and took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. "Yes, I am." The representative handed me the heavy envelope, pushing it toward my chest. "Mom, this is a formal notice of foreclosure. The second mortgage on this property, totaling $1.5 million, is severely delinquent. The grace period has expired and no payments have been registered. We are here to formally initiate the seizure of the asset. You will be required to vacate the premises immediately." My mother could no longer contain her absolute glee. She pushed past the bank representatives and marched right up to the bottom of the porch steps, pulling down her sunglasses so I could see the malicious joy dancing in her cold eyes. "You heard the man, Sydney," my mother sneered. her voice laced with pure venom. "The house belongs to the bank now. Your little legal trick with the trust last night means absolutely nothing when there is a massive federal lien on the property. I told you to take the garage, but you wanted to be stubborn and disrespectful. Now you can go pack your cheap clothes and move into a homeless shelter. You played your little games, and you lost everything." Ashley angled the camera to capture my reaction, waiting for me to break down in tears and beg for mercy. Jamal crossed his arms over his chest, puffed out in total victory. They were entirely convinced that they had executed the perfect financial trap. I did not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I did not scream. I did not drop to my knees. I simply placed my ceramic coffee mug on the wooden railing of the porch. I reached down and picked up the heavy black leather briefcase I had packed earlier that morning. My mother stopped laughing, her eyes narrowing as she tried to calculate my next move. Jamal let his arms drop to his sides, the arrogant puff of his chest deflating just a fraction. Ashley kept the camera rolling, her followers undoubtedly eager to see what the supposed villain of her story was about to do. I walked down the wooden steps, the crisp morning air biting at my face. I bypassed my family, completely acting as if they were nothing more than ghosts haunting my front lawn. I walked directly toward the lead bank representative, who was still holding out the manila envelope containing the foreclosure notice. I did not take the envelope. Instead, I set my heavy briefcase down on the hood of his black sedan. I popped the brass latches open with two sharp clicks that echoed across the quiet suburban street. I pulled out a massive, professionally bound document. It was exactly 200 pages thick, printed on high-quality paper, and secured with a rigid black spine. I lifted it high enough for everyone to see, and then dropped it flat onto the hood of the car. The heavy thud made both bank representatives jump backward in surprise. "What is this?" the lead representative asked, his professional facade cracking into genuine bewilderment. "That is a comprehensive forensic audit," I replied, my voice projecting clearly so that Ashley's phone microphone would capture every single syllable. "It details the exact timeline, origin, and digital footprint of the $1.5 million second mortgage you are attempting to collect on today. I suggest you read the executive summary on page 1 before you try to seize an asset based on a completely fraudulent federal lien." My mother let out a nervous scoff, taking a hesitant step toward the car. "Do not listen to her, she is just trying to stall?" Barbara snapped, her voice pitching up an octave. "She made up those papers." The bank representative ignored her, his eyes scanning the bold text on the first page of the audit. I kept my gaze locked on him and began to recite the facts I had memorized over the long, sleepless night. "According to your bank's records, the loan application was initiated and electronically signed on October 12th, I stated firmly. The funds were disbursed 48 hours later directly into an offshore holding account registered to a shell company. A shell company that, as page 42 of my audit proves, is entirely controlled by my brother-in-law, Jamal." Jamal choked on a breath of air, taking a rapid step back. I pressed forward, my voice cutting through the morning air like a surgical scalpel. "There is just one massive problem with your October 12th signature date. My father suffered his massive stroke on October 10th. He was immediately life-flighted to Chicago General Hospital and placed in a medically induced coma. He remained in that coma until his death." The second bank representative gasped, pulling a tablet from his briefcase to hastily verify my claims. I tapped the thick binder on the hood of the car. "Page 87 contains the sworn medical affidavits and hospital admission records signed by the chief of neurology." I continued. "A man in a deep coma cannot authorize a $1.5 million second mortgage. He cannot log into an email portal, and he certainly cannot authorize a digital signature." The lead representative looked up, his face completely drained of color. "If what you are saying is true, then this loan is," he stammered, unable to finish the sentence. "It is textbook federal wire fraud and aggravated identity theft," I finished for him. "But it gets worse. Page 112 contains the digital forensics report. The IP address used to execute that forged signature traces back to the primary desktop computer inside this very house, the exact computer that my mother Barbara uses daily. You did not just issue a bad loan, gentlemen. You inadvertently facilitated a massive domestic financial crime." The silence that fell over the front lawn was absolute. My mother's jaw dropped open, her designer sunglasses sliding slightly down the bridge of her nose. The malicious joy that had illuminated her face just moments ago was entirely extinguished, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. Ashley was still holding her phone up, but her hand was shaking violently. I turned back to the bank representatives. "If you proceed with this foreclosure today," I told them calmly, "I will immediately file an injunction naming your institution as an active participant in a conspiracy to commit wire fraud against a deceased client's estate. You have a choice to make right now." The lead bank representative did not hesitate for a single second. He grabbed the forensic audit from the hood and pulled his cell phone from his pocket. He walked several paces away down the gravel driveway, pressing the phone to his ear with trembling fingers. I could hear the frantic urgency in his voice, demanding to be connected to the bank's highest-level compliance department. The second representative remained frozen in place, staring at me as if I had just detonated an explosive device on my front lawn. Their smug confidence completely evaporated. Jamal was aggressively loosening his expensive tie, looking flushed. My mother was chewing on her bottom lip, her eyes darting between me and the representative. And then there was Ashley. She held her smartphone high, the lens fixed on the disaster. She was so desperate to broadcast my humiliation that she forgot the cardinal rule of live streaming. Once truth hits the internet, you cannot take it back. I watched her screen out of the corner of my eye. The chat box was scrolling at lightning speed. Her followers, who had been sending prayer emojis just minutes prior, were now catching on to the reality of the situation. "Do not listen to her," Ashley stammered into the microphone, her voice cracking with panic. "My sister is just making things up. She is jealous of Jamal. She printed out fake papers, but it was too late." I took a step closer to Ashley, ensuring my voice would be picked up crystal clear by her phone. "Tell your audience the truth," I said calmly. "Tell them how Jamal forged a signature while our father fought for his life. Tell them how you tried to steal my inheritance to fund a fake tech company." The chat exploded. I could read the comments flying up the side of her screen. People were typing in caps, calling her a fraud, demanding to know if her husband was a criminal. Ashley tried to swipe the comments away, but they kept coming faster. Her carefully curated influencer persona was crumbling in real time, broadcasted live to thousands of people. The lead bank representative marched back up the driveway, his face pale and covered in a thin layer of sweat. He stopped in front of Jamal, clutching his phone. "I just got off the phone with our federal compliance director," the representative announced, his voice rigid. "Based on the documentation provided in this forensic audit, we are immediately halting all foreclosure proceedings on this property." My mother let out a shrill gasp. "You cannot do that," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is lying. You have to take the house." "We are not taking the house," the representative fired back, losing his customer service politeness. "In fact, we are legally obligated under federal banking regulations to take immediate action regarding the fraudulent funds." Jamal opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, his jacket pocket began to vibrate. Then his pants pocket vibrated. A loud, continuous chime erupted from his phone. Jamal pulled the device out and stared at the screen. Even from several feet away, I could see the bright red notification banners flashing one after another. "What is happening?" Jamal demanded, his voice pitching up in genuine terror. The bank representative looked at him with absolute contempt. "As of this exact second, sir, every single corporate and personal account associated with your name, your social security number, and your business tax identification number has been completely frozen. You no longer have access to a single cent." Jamal frantically tapped his phone screen, his thumbs flying across the glass as he tried to open his mobile banking application. "Access denied," he whispered, his eyes wide with horror. "It says access denied. My startup funds, my personal checking, everything is locked." Ashley gasped and spun the camera around to face Jamal. "Babe, what do you mean everything is locked?" she cried out. The chat went absolutely wild as thousands of viewers watched the disaster unfold. Viewers were recording the screen, recording Jamal's panic, recording my mother's complete meltdown. They were spamming the comments with sirens and laughing emojis, calling them scammers and thieves. "You are completely ruined," Ashley, one angry comment read. Another user typed, "The FBI is definitely going to love this live stream." Ashley finally realized what she was doing and frantically mashed the screen to end the broadcast. But the damage was already done. Thousands of people had just witnessed the complete financial destruction of her husband. I stood on my front porch watching the absolute chaos unfold. Jamal was violently shaking his frozen phone. My mother was screaming at the bank representatives. The trap they built for me had just clamped shut violently around their own ankles. Jamal stopped shaking his phone and slowly looked up. The realization that he was facing federal prison time finally broke through his arrogant CEO facade. He shoved past Ashley, who was still weeping over her ruined livestream, and marched directly toward the lead bank representative. "Listen to me," Jamal pleaded, his voice completely stripped of its usual smooth confidence. "I had absolutely nothing to do with that signature. You have to believe me." My mother-in-law, Barbara, handed me the documents. She told me William signed them before he went to the hospital. She told me the $1.5 million was an early inheritance, a legitimate gift, to help scale my startup. He pointed an accusing finger straight at my mother. "She is the one who logged into the computer," Jamal shouted. "She is the one who forged the signature. I am just a businessman trying to build a company. I did not know she was committing mortgage fraud. You cannot freeze my accounts for her crime. I am a victim here just as much as the bank is." My mother let out a sound that was half gasp and half primal shriek. The absolute shock of being thrown under the bus by her favorite son-in-law caused her to physically stumble backward. She stared at Jamal, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. Then her shock curdled into an explosive, venomous rage. I had known my mother was a cruel woman, but I had never seen her completely drop her refined, wealthy suburbanite mask until this very second. "You ungrateful, lying street rat!" My mother screamed, her voice cracking with fury. She lunged forward, her manicured hands curled into claws, as if she wanted to physically tear Jamal's tailored suit off his back. "Do not you dare stand there and play the innocent victim. You knew exactly where that money was coming from. You begged me for it. You sat in my kitchen and cried about how your pathetic little company was weeks away from total bankruptcy." The bank representatives took several steps back, alarmed by the escalating violence. Jamal held his hands up defensively, but my mother was not finished. She turned to the bank employees, her face flushed a dark, angry red. "I never wanted him in my family," she yelled, her underlying prejudice finally spilling out into the open. "William and I gave Ashley the best education, the best upbringing, and she dragged home a fast-talking con artist with nothing but a flashy smile and empty pockets. He has never worked a real day in his life. He just uses big corporate buzzwords to hide the fact that he is a complete failure." Ashley sobbed harder, stepping between them. "Mom, stop it," she begged. "He is my husband." My mother shoved Ashley's hand away, her eyes wild. "Your husband is a parasite," Barbara spat. "Do you want to know why I forged the documents, Ashley? Do you want to know why I risked everything to get him that $1.5 million? Because I was sick and tired of listening to you whine. Every single day you complained about how Jamal was stressed, how Jamal needed capital, how Jamal was going to leave you if he could not secure funding. I funded his fake company just to shut you up and keep up appearances at the country club." Jamal sneered, looking at his wife and mother-in-law with absolute disgust. "Keep up appearances," Jamal mocked. "You are the one who is obsessed with looking rich, Barbara. You did not give me that money out of the goodness of your heart. You did it because you knew William was going to leave everything to Sydney, and you wanted to drain the estate before he died. You are a thief. You stole from your own dying husband." "You are the one going to federal prison!" My mother shrieked back, pointing a trembling finger in his face. "You are the one whose accounts are frozen. I am going to tell the judge everything. I am going to testify against you, Jamal. I will make sure you spend the rest of your miserable life behind bars." I stood on the porch, watching the glorious implosion. In less than 10 minutes, the united front they had built to destroy me had shattered into a million jagged pieces. They were rats trapped on a sinking ship, viciously biting each other in a desperate attempt to survive. The bank representatives were frantically taking notes, documenting every single confession being screamed across the lawn. Jamal thought the frozen bank accounts were the worst of his problems. He was loudly claiming he only used the money for his startup to be a good businessman. It was time for me to introduce the bank representatives and my sister Ashley to the real reason Jamal needed $1 million. I reached into my leather briefcase one more time. I pulled out a slim, bright red folder from the depths of my briefcase. It was much thinner than the comprehensive audit, but the documents inside were far more destructive. Jamal was still pacing on the gravel driveway, running his hands over his shaved head, sweating profusely as he continued to plead his case to the bank employees. He swore up and down that he was just a dedicated entrepreneur who had been manipulated by a scheming mother-in-law. He claimed every single penny of that $1.5 million had gone directly into server costs, software development, and payroll for his brilliant tech startup. I walked back over to the black sedan and slapped the red folder down onto the hood, right next to the massive audit. "You are a terrible liar, Jamal," I said, my voice slicing through his frantic rambling. "And you are an even worse money launderer." Jamal froze, his eyes dropping to the red folder. Ashley slowly stepped forward, her tear-streaked face pale with fresh dread. My mother stopped screaming and crossed her arms, watching me with a mixture of hatred and reluctant curiosity. "As a forensic accountant, I do not just look at where the money comes from," I explained calmly, opening the folder. "I track exactly where it goes. I follow every wire transfer, every ATM withdrawal, and every offshore routing number until I find the final destination. You claimed you used that money for your company, but my investigation revealed that your tech startup has not employed a single software developer in 2 years. You do not own any servers. Your business address is a rented mailbox at a rundown strip mall." I pulled out a stack of high-resolution glossy photographs and spread them across the hood of the car. They were aerial drone shots of a stunning modern penthouse located in one of the most expensive high-rise buildings in downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a private rooftop terrace, and a custom infinity pool gleamed under the morning sun. "That is a beautiful property," I noted, tapping the center photograph. It was purchased in cash exactly 3 weeks after the forged mortgage loan was approved. I slid a thick stack of escrow documents and title deeds next to the photos. "Here is the final closing paperwork. You will notice that the property was not purchased under your company name, Jamal." Ashley leaned over the hood of the car, her eyes scanning the highlighted lines on the escrow documents. Her breath hitched in her throat. "The buyer is listed as a limited liability company called J&M Holdings," I continued smoothly. "J stands for Jamal, and M stands for Mia." Ashley let out a strangled gasp. "Who is Mia?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a massive credit card statement linked directly to the J&M Holdings account. "Mia is the woman your husband has been secretly dating for the past 18 months, I told my sister without an ounce of pity. "And thanks to our father's stolen equity, Mia has been living an incredibly lavish lifestyle." I read down the list of highlighted transactions on the statement, letting each item ring out in the quiet morning air. $40,000 at a luxury car dealership for a down payment on a white Range Rover. $12,000 for first-class tickets to a resort in the Maldives. $8,000 at a designer jewelry boutique on Michigan Avenue. And my personal favorite, a monthly recurring charge of $500 for a private couples massage therapist. Ashley stared at the credit card statements, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the paper. She looked at the date of the Maldives trip. "You told me you were at a tech conference in Silicon Valley that week," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "You told me you were pitching to investors." Jamal took a step toward her, his hands raised in a desperate, pleading gesture. "Ash, baby, listen to me." He stammered, his smooth CEO voice completely gone, replaced by the pathetic whine of a cornered coward. "It is not what it looks like. That is just a business associate. We were entertaining clients. Sydney is manipulating the documents to make me look bad. The lead bank representative scoffed loudly, shaking his head in absolute disgust. Sir, these are certified federal wire records, the representative stated flatly. You cannot manipulate a registered title deed. You bought a penthouse for your mistress using funds obtained through mortgage fraud. My mother let out a sharp, cruel laugh, covering her mouth with her hand. She looked at Jamal as if he was the most pathetic creature on earth. I told you, Ashley, my mother sneered. I told you he was a worthless street rat. You married a complete loser who could not even cheat on you with his own money. The humiliation was absolute. Jamal stood frozen in the driveway, stripped of his fake wealth, his fake company, and his fake marriage. He had tried to steal my home and mock my career. But my calculator job had just systematically dismantled his entire life piece by piece. Ashley stood completely paralyzed, staring at the glossy photographs and the credit card statements spread across the hood of the black sedan. Her hands hovered over the images of the infinity pool and the white Range Rover, as if touching them would make the nightmare real. The silence on the lawn was absolute, broken only by the sound of the morning breeze rustling through the oak trees. Then a low, guttural sound escaped her throat. It was not the delicate, performative crying she used for her social media followers. It was the raw, ugly sound of a woman whose entire reality had just been violently ripped apart. You bought her a penthouse? Ashley whispered, her voice trembling so hard it sounded like it was vibrating. You bought her a penthouse with my father's money while you told me we had to put our honeymoon on hold to fund your startup. Jamal took a step backward, his hands raised defensively. Ashley, baby, please, he begged, his eyes darting toward the bank representatives who were watching the scene with undisguised horror. Let us go inside and talk about this privately. Sydney is just trying to tear us apart. Talk about it privately! Ashley shrieked, the volume of her voice making my mother flinch. You spent $12,000 taking another woman to the Maldives. You told me you were at a tech conference eating cheap takeout in a hotel room. I defended you. I lied for you. I let my mother steal from my own sister for you. The polished influencer facade completely shattered. Ashley lunged forward with a ferocity I had never seen from her before. She slammed her fists into Jamal's chest, her manicured nails tearing at the lapels of his expensive bespoke suit. Jamal stumbled backward, tripping over the gravel driveway as Ashley relentlessly pushed forward, screaming incoherently. She slapped him across the face, the sharp crack echoing loudly. She grabbed the collar of his shirt, ripping the fabric as she tried to hit him again. Stop it, Jamal yelled, raising his arms to shield his face. Get off me, you crazy witch! My mother finally snapped out of her shock and rushed forward, trying to grab Ashley's waist to pull her away. Ashley, stop it! Barbara cried out. You are making a scene in front of the neighbors. Stop it right now. But Ashley was completely unhinged. She elbowed my mother away and launched herself at Jamal again, kicking at his shins and tearing a gold chain from his neck. You ruined my life, she sobbed, hitting him squarely in the jaw. You made me an accessory to federal fraud for your mistress. Jamal had finally had enough. With a violent shove, he pushed Ashley away, sending her stumbling backward until she lost her footing and fell hard onto the manicured grass. She lay there gasping for air, her perfect blonde hair tangled and her designer sweater covered in dirt. Jamal stood over her, straightening his torn jacket, his chest heaving. The smooth, charming CEO was gone. In his place stood a desperate, cornered criminal willing to sacrifice anyone to save himself. He looked at the bank representatives who were already backing away from the escalating domestic violence. You are the one who ruined my life, Jamal spat, pointing a shaking finger at Ashley and then at my mother. I am not going down for this. I am not spending 20 years in a federal penitentiary because you two decided to commit mortgage fraud. I did not sign those papers. You stole the money. You handed it to me. I thought it was a legitimate business loan from the estate. Jamal looked down at Ashley, his eyes completely cold and devoid of any affection. I am filing for divorce this afternoon, he declared, his voice ringing with cruel finality. I am completely separating my assets and my name from this family. You and your mother can explain the forged signatures to the federal investigators. I am calling my legal team, and I am done with you. Ashley let out a devastated wail, curling into a ball on the grass. Jamal did not even look back. He turned around and sprinted toward his sleek sports car. He ripped the door open, jumped inside, and slammed it shut. The engine roared to life with a deafening rev. He threw the car into reverse tires, spinning and kicking up gravel as he hastily backed out of the driveway. He did not care that his bank accounts were frozen or that he was leaving his wife crying in the dirt. His only instinct was self-preservation. My mother stood frozen, watching the sports car speed down the suburban street until it disappeared around the corner. The silence returned, leaving only the sound of Ashley's broken sobbing. The bank representatives exchanged a deeply uncomfortable glance, hastily gathering the files from the hood of the car. They had seen more than enough. I remained on the porch, calmly watching the wreckage. The empire they thought they had built had crumbled in less than an hour, leaving them with absolutely nothing. The lead bank representative cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the property. He clutched my forensic audit tightly against his chest, treating it like a loaded weapon. "Mom, we will hand all of this documentation over to our legal department and the federal authorities by noon today," he told me, his voice stripped of its prior authority. "We strongly advise you to retain counsel to navigate the fallout." I nodded. They sprinted to their sedans, speeding away to escape the radioactive blast radius of my family. Now it was just the three of us left. Ashley was curled into a tight ball on the damp grass, ruining her expensive beige sweater, weeping uncontrollably over a husband who had traded her for a downtown penthouse and a mistress named Mia. My mother stood at the bottom of the porch steps. She watched the bank vehicles disappear down the tree-lined street and realized her safety net had evaporated. The aggressive, venomous matriarch vanished. In her place stood a desperate, terrified woman who suddenly understood she had zero leverage left. She slowly walked up the wooden steps, her posture slouching, her eyes wide and pleading. She reached out with trembling hands and gently grabbed my wrists. Her perfectly manicured nails dug slightly into my skin, as if she was trying to physically transfer her panic into my bloodstream. "Sydney, please," she whispered, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "Please, you have to stop this. You cannot let them send me to federal prison. I am your mother. We are family." I looked down at her manicured hands gripping my wrists. I did not pull away. I wanted her to feel how completely rigid and unyielding my muscles were. "I know I made a terrible mistake, Sydney." Barbara cried, a tear rolling down her powdered cheek. "But you have to understand how utterly terrified I was. When your father died, I felt like my entire world had collapsed around me. I was so scared of being left with nothing. I was scared of being broke and humiliated in front of our wealthy friends. I just wanted to make sure Ashley and I were taken care of. Your father was a good man. He loved us so much. He would not want his family destroyed like this. He would want us to forgive each other and move forward. He would want you to show mercy." The sheer audacity of invoking my father's name to excuse $1 million federal wire fraud was staggering. I looked into her tear-filled eyes and felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt, no lingering sense of familial obligation. "You are not scared of being broke," I replied, my voice as cold as the marble countertops inside the house. "You were scared of not being able to maintain your Platinum Country Club membership. You were scared you could not afford to buy Ashley a new designer handbag every single month. Do not you dare use my father's memory to justify your selfish greed. You hated the way he managed his money because he refused to let you squander his hard-earned wealth on your vanity projects." I slowly peeled her fingers off my wrists, stepping back so she could not touch me again. "And do not talk to me about family," I continued, my tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You made it abundantly clear exactly how you felt about me for the last 15 years. Let us talk about family, Barbara. When I was 18, you told me my accounting degree was too boring to invest in and you refused to co-sign my student loans. When I graduated at the top of my university class, you did not even bother to show up to the ceremony because you were busy taking Ashley to a luxury spa resort in Aspen. You spent my entire life treating me like a burdensome stranger, living inside your house," I told her, watching her face pale with every word. I spent my childhood desperately seeking a single word of validation from you. You mocked my career choice every chance you got, calling it a glorified calculator job. You sat at that dining table last night and laughed while Jamal tried to throw me out into the garage. You were perfectly happy to watch the bank destroy my credit score and evict me from my own home this morning. You only remember that you are my mother when you are standing on the edge of a cliff and you desperately need someone to pull you back. Barbara opened her mouth to argue, to offer another hollow apology, but I cut her off. I am not dropping the charges I stated with absolute finality. The audit is in the hands of the authorities. You made your choices and now you are going to pay the federal consequences. I will not protect you from the law anymore. The moment those words left my mouth, the fragile, terrified widow act completely evaporated. I watched my mother's face undergo a terrifying transformation. Her shoulders squared and her trembling bottom lip pulled back into a rigid, cruel line. The fake tears that had been pooling in her eyes seemed to dry up instantly, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. She realized that playing the victim was not going to work. The guilt trip had failed, so she decided to scorch the earth. If you will not drop the charges, then I am going to make sure you lose every single thing you think you own. My mother hissed, her voice dropping to a low, venomous register. She aggressively unclasped her designer purse, her manicured hands digging frantically past her makeup compacts and leather wallet. She was searching for something specific, something she had clearly brought with her as a contingency plan. A final nuclear option in case the foreclosure trap failed. Ashley slowly sat up on the damp grass, her tear-streaked face staring at our mother in confusion. "Mom, what are you doing?" Ashley asked, her voice weak and raspy from sobbing over her ruined marriage. My mother ignored her completely. She yanked her hand out of the purse, clutching a small folded envelope. It was not crisp legal paper like the documents I had brought. It was old, crumpled at the edges, and slightly yellowed with age. She held it up in the morning sunlight, her eyes locking onto mine with an expression of pure, unadulterated malice. "You stand there acting so high and mighty?" My mother spat, taking a step closer to the porch. "You act like you are the sole protector of William's legacy. You judge Ashley and Jamal. You judge me. You parade around with your forensic audits and your trust funds, acting like the perfect, dutiful daughter defending her beloved father." She waved the crumpled envelope in the air, her voice rising in pitch and volume until she was practically screaming. "But you have no right to his legacy, Sydney. You have absolutely no right to be so self-righteous, because William was not even your real father." The words hung in the crisp morning air, heavy and suffocating. Ashley gasped loudly, covering her mouth with her dirt-stained hands. "That is right." My mother laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that held no humor. "I am not the only one who lived a lie in this house. 34 years ago, William was busy building his little real estate empire. He worked 80 hours a week and left me alone in a massive house. I was bored. I was lonely. So I found comfort somewhere else. I had an affair with a man whose last name I barely even remember, and then I got pregnant with you." She took another step toward me, her face flushed with the thrill of delivering what she believed was a fatal blow. "Do you want to know why I could never stand the sight of you?" My mother continued, her voice dripping with poison. "Every time I looked at you, I saw my own mistake. I saw a child who did not belong in my perfect life. I had to force myself to smile at your birthdays. I had to pretend to care while you followed him around like a pathetic little puppy. You thought I favored Ashley because she was prettier or more popular. No, I favored Ashley because she was actually my husband's child. She was the legitimate heir. You were just a stray dog we let sleep in the house." Ashley was hyperventilating on the grass, the shock of her husband's betrayal now colliding with the destruction of her entire family history. "Mom, stop," Ashley begged, her voice cracking. "What are you saying?" "She is nothing to you," my mother screamed down at Ashley, kicking the gravel. "She is a parasite who has been feeding off our family." My mother unfolded the paper inside the envelope and slammed it down on the wooden railing of the porch right next to my coffee mug. It was an old laboratory DNA report. "You are a bastard child, Sydney," my mother sneered, pointing at the faded ink. You do not share a single drop of William's blood. You do not have his genetics. You have absolutely no biological connection to the man you have spent your entire life worshipping. She crossed her arms over her chest, heaving with exertion. Her eyes were wide and manic, completely consumed by her own toxic delusion. You think your little legal tricks are going to save you now? She challenged, her voice echoing down the empty suburban street. An irrevocable trust is designed to protect family assets. But you are not family. You are a fraud. The moment I take this DNA test to a probate judge, your precious trust will be entirely invalidated. The court will see that you have zero biological claim to this estate. They will strip you of your title as trustee. They will void the property transfer and everything will default right back to me as his legal widow. My mother tilted her head, a sick, triumphant smile spreading across her face. She truly believed she had just won. She thought she had completely destroyed my identity, my legal standing, and my emotional sanity, all in one swift strike. You are going to leave this house with absolutely nothing. Sydney, my mother whispered, her eyes gleaming with malice. Because you are nothing. My mother stood panting slightly, her chest heaving as she waited for my world to shatter. She waited for the tears, the denial, the desperate scrambling to protect my identity. She expected me to fall to my knees, just like Ashley had done minutes before. But the tears never came. The shock never registered. Instead, a sound bubbled up from the back of my throat. It started as a low chuckle, building in intensity until it erupted into a full, genuine laugh. It was a dark, terrifying laugh that echoed across the quiet suburban lawn, bouncing off the manicured hedges and the stone facade of the $4 million estate. My mother flinched, her eyes darting around nervously. Her triumphant smile faltered. "What are you laughing at?" she demanded, her voice sharp with sudden uncertainty. "You just lost everything. You are a fraud." I took a deep breath, letting the laughter subside into a cold, steady smile. I reached out and picked up my ceramic coffee mug, taking a slow, deliberate sip before setting it back down. "You really thought you were holding on to the ultimate weapon, did not you, Barbara?" I asked, my voice perfectly level. "You kept that piece of paper hidden in your purse like a loaded gun, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy my life." I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space until I could see the fine lines of panic forming around her eyes. "I have known about my DNA since I was 15 years old," I told her, watching the color completely drain from her face. Ashley, who was still sitting on the damp grass, let out a quiet gasp. "What?" Ashley whispered. I did not break eye contact with my mother. "You were always so careless, Barbara." I continued, my tone conversational, but laced with absolute ice. "Did you really forget the biology project I had to do in my sophomore year of high school? We were learning about blood types and genetic inheritance. I needed your blood type and William's blood type to map out a Punnett square. You were O negative, William was AB positive, and I was O positive." I watched her swallow hard, her throat clicking in the silence. Even a 15-year-old with a basic understanding of high school biology knows that an AB positive parent and an O negative parent cannot physically produce an O positive child, I stated flatly. "I knew instantly. I knew you had an affair. I knew William was not my biological father." My mother took a small step backward, her manicured hands twitching at her sides. "So what?" she stammered, trying to regain her footing. "That just proves my point. You knew you were a bastard and you kept your mouth shut so you could leech off his money. You are just as much of a con artist as Jamal." I shook my head slowly, the smile never leaving my face. "No, Barbara. I did not keep my mouth shut to leech off his money. I kept my mouth shut because I went straight to William the very next day. I walked into his study, crying my eyes out, terrified that the man I loved more than anyone else in the world was going to throw me out of the house. The memory was still crystal clear in my mind. The smell of his pipe tobacco, the heavy leather of his armchair, the way he immediately dropped his paperwork the second he saw my tears. He sat me down and wiped my face. And then he told me the truth. He knew, I said, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. He knew before I was even born. He found out about your affair 6 months into your pregnancy. He hired a private investigator who confirmed that the man you were sleeping with was the actual father. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Her eyes were wide with sheer terror. "No!" she whispered, shaking her head frantically. "No, he did not know. He never said a word. He never said a word because he made a choice," I explained, stepping closer again. He looked at me crying in his study, and he told me that DNA did not make a father. Choices made a father. He chose to raise me. He chose to love me. He told me that out of the 2 daughters living in this house, I was the only one who actually shared his values, his work ethic, and his integrity. He knew exactly what you were, Barbara. He knew you were shallow and greedy, and he knew that if he ever confronted you about the affair, you would use me as a pawn in a messy divorce and try to take half of his empire. Ashley was staring at me. Her jaw dropped, her own tragedy temporarily forgotten in the wake of this massive revelation. "He knew Mom cheated," Ashley asked, her voice hollow. "He knew everything," I confirmed, looking directly at my mother, whose entire body was now trembling. "He protected me from you for 15 years. And while you were busy plotting to steal his money and fund Jamal's fake tech company, William was busy setting up an irrevocable trust, a trust that explicitly bypasses probate court, a trust that cannot be contested by a bitter widow with an old DNA test." My mother let out a small, pathetic whimper, stumbling backward until her back hit the wooden railing of the porch. "You really thought you outsmarted him?" I asked, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You thought you could use biology to invalidate a legally binding trust? The trust does not require me to be his biological daughter, Barbara. It only requires me to be his named trustee. And I am. So your little envelope is completely useless. You have no leverage, you have no money, and very soon you will have no freedom." My mother stared at me, her chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. She looked like a woman who had just stepped on a landmine and heard the click beneath her designer heel. She opened her mouth to hurl another insult to deny the truth I had just spoken, but the words died in her throat. I did not give her the chance to recover. I reached back into my heavy leather briefcase one last time. I was done explaining the law to her. It was time to let William speak for himself. I pulled out a small, sleek black cylinder. It was a high-end portable Bluetooth speaker. I set it down on the wooden railing, right next to the crumpled laboratory envelope my mother had tried to use as a weapon. I pressed the power button, and a soft chime echoed in the morning air, signaling the device was ready to pair. I unlocked my smartphone and tapped the screen, opening a hidden encrypted audio file. "You called me a liar, Barbara," I said, my voice slicing through the heavy silence. "You claimed William never knew about your affair. You claimed I was just a con artist stealing your legitimate inheritance, but my profession taught me never to enter a confrontation without irrefutable primary evidence." I pressed play. For a brief second, there was only the sound of static and the soft rustle of fabric. Then a voice filled the driveway. It was deep, gravelly, and unmistakable. It was William. "Testing, testing," he said, his voice coughing slightly before clearing. "Sydney, if you are listening to this, it means my time has finally run out, and the vultures have started circling the estate just like we knew they would." My mother let out a strangled gasp, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. Ashley scrambled backward on the grass, her eyes wide with disbelief at hearing our father's voice from beyond the grave. It sounded so clear, so present, that for a fleeting moment it felt like he was standing right there on the porch beside me. "I am recording this statement on September 28th. William continued, his voice steady and resolute. "I am of sound mind and body. I am making this recording to clarify my absolute final wishes regarding the William family irrevocable trust, and to ensure my wife Barbara cannot manipulate the narrative after I am gone." The audio paused for a moment as he took a slow breath. I watched my mother's face turn a sickening shade of gray. "I know about the DNA," William said, the recording capturing the weary resignation in his tone. "I have known since the year Barbara got pregnant. I hired a private investigator who confirmed she was sleeping with another man. I could have divorced her. I could have thrown her out on the street and let her figure out how to survive without my bank accounts. But then I looked at the little girl she brought into my home. I looked at Sydney. Ashley let out a soft sob, pulling her knees to her chest. Genetics are just a biological accident, William explained, his voice growing stronger, filled with a fierce protective warmth. Being a father is a choice. I chose Sydney. From the moment she could walk, she was the only person in this entire house who looked at me and saw a father instead of a walking ATM machine. She did not care about the size of my company or the balance of my portfolio. She just wanted to sit in my study and read books with me. She was honest. She was brilliant. She had integrity. The recording captured the sound of William shifting in his leather chair. Barbara thinks she is clever. His voice sneered, the warmth instantly vanishing, replaced by a cold, hard disgust that mirrored my own. She thinks I am just an old fool who never noticed her greed. I watched her treat Sydney like an outsider for decades. I watched her mold Ashley into a spoiled, entitled replica of herself. I watched them both sit at my dinner table and calculate how much longer I had to live so they could liquidate my life work to fund their shallow lifestyles. My mother covered her ears, her face contorted in agony, trying to block out the sound of her late husband's absolute rejection. But the speaker was too loud. So let me be perfectly clear for the legal record, William stated, his words echoing like a judge's gavel. Sydney is my daughter. She is my only true child. She is the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary of my entire empire. I entrust everything I have built to her because she is the only one who possesses the moral character to protect it. Barbara and Ashley are entitled to absolutely nothing. They are a disgrace to my name. I paused the audio file, the silence rushing back into the yard with a deafening weight. My mother slowly lowered her hands from her ears, her entire body trembling violently. The illusion she had built over 30 years was completely annihilated. William had not just disinherited her, he had exposed her, he had judged her, and he had found her entirely worthless. The recording continued, William's voice ringing with a cold clarity that cut through the morning air like a knife. He did not stutter and he did not hesitate. This was not the voice of a confused old man. This was the voice of a titan ensuring his legacy was impenetrable. I anticipated Barbara would attempt exactly what she is doing right now. William stated his words, directed at the future he had foreseen, with perfect accuracy. I knew the moment my heart stopped beating, she would try to seize my assets, evict Sydney, and liquidate the estate to maintain her superficial status. She believes her position as my widow grants her absolute authority. She is entirely incorrect. My mother swayed on her feet, grabbing the porch railing to keep from collapsing. Therefore, William continued, I have taken every legal precaution to permanently dismantle her access to my wealth. 3 years ago, I legally transferred the primary estate, the investment portfolios, and all liquid assets into the William Family Irrevocable Trust. The language of this trust is airtight and explicitly drafted to withstand any challenge in probate court. It explicitly names Sydney as the sole trustee and sole beneficiary. The trust dictates that no biological requirement exists for Sydney to maintain this role. She is my chosen heir legally and unconditionally. Ashley let out a soft groan, burying her face in her hands. The reality was crashing down on her. The money she thought she could always fall back on, the safety net her mother had promised, did not exist. It had never existed. To ensure my intent cannot be contested. William's voice commanded the space again. I am stating for the official record that I explicitly and intentionally disinherit my wife Barbara and my biological daughter Ashley. They are financially predatory. They have spent decades treating my wealth as a bottomless resource for their vanity, while treating the only person who genuinely cared for me with absolute disdain. I leave them exactly what they have earned through their loyalty and integrity. Nothing. Any attempt by Barbara to contest this trust using DNA evidence, allegations of undue influence, or claims of marital rights is entirely voided by this recording and the accompanying sworn legal affidavits filed with my attorney. The finality in his words was absolute. It was a complete legal and emotional annihilation. William had foreseen every move my mother would make and had checkmated her from beyond the grave. "I want Sydney to have the house," William concluded, his voice softening just a fraction, returning to the fatherly warmth I remembered so fondly. "I want her to have the security I tried to provide while I was alive. And to Barbara, if you are listening to this because you tried to throw my daughter out on the street, know this. You did not outsmart me. You never outsmarted me. You merely exhausted my patience. You have no power here anymore." The recording ended with a soft click, followed by the electronic chime of the Bluetooth speaker disconnecting. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The morning breeze had died down, leaving the suburban street eerily still. My mother did not scream. She did not yell. She simply stared at the sleek black speaker, her eyes vacant, her mouth slightly open. The realization of her total defeat had finally broken her. She was not just broke. She had been publicly humiliated by the husband she thought she had manipulated for 30 years. I reached out and picked up the speaker, dropping it back into my leather briefcase. I then picked up the crumpled laboratory envelope containing the DNA results and held it out toward her. "You can take this to a probate judge if you really want to, Barbara." I told her, my voice calm and devoid of any malice. "But as William just explained, it will not change a single thing. You have no legal standing, no biological leverage, and no money to pay the retainer for a lawyer who would be foolish enough to take a case they are guaranteed to lose. You spent my entire life trying to make me feel like I did not belong in this family. You succeeded. I am not your family. I am the trustee of the estate you tried to steal." Ashley slowly stood up from the grass, brushing the dirt off her ruined beige sweater. She looked at our mother, her eyes red and swollen. "Mom," Ashley whispered, her voice trembling, "what are we going to do?" My mother did not answer. She could not look at Ashley. She could not look at me. She simply stared at the wooden floorboards of the porch. The reality of her situation slowly wrapping around her throat. I picked up my ceramic coffee mug and took a final sip. "You should probably start calling moving companies," I suggested, turning toward the heavy oak doors of the house. "Because unlike you, I am not going to give you 2 hours to vacate the premises. You have until noon." I turned the brass knob, stepped inside my $4 million estate, and let the heavy door click shut behind me, leaving them standing on the lawn with absolutely nothing. I had turned away to walk inside, but I stopped with my hand hovering over the heavy brass doorknob. The crushing weight of the silence on the lawn was suddenly broken by a sound that made my blood run cold. It was not my mother crying or Ashley sobbing. It was the Bluetooth speaker inside my briefcase. It had not disconnected. It had merely paused between audio files. A second track began to play. I slowly turned back around, letting my hand drop from the door. I thought William had said everything he needed to say, but his voice returned, filling the driveway once more. This time he sounded different. The strong, resolute tone of a businessman securing his empire was gone. His voice was ragged, shallow, and laced with a terrifying exhaustion. "September 29th. He rasped the recording, crackling slightly as if he was holding the microphone too close to his face. "I need to get this down while I still have the strength to speak." My mother, who had been staring blankly at the wooden floorboards, snapped her head up. Her eyes went wide with a new kind of terror. This was not the financial recording. She lunged forward, her manicured hands scrambling for my briefcase. "Turn it off," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Sydney, turn it off right now." I stepped sharply to the side, blocking her path and pulling the briefcase out of her reach. "I do not think so, Barbara," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Let the man finish. I am recording this because I know I am dying." William wheezed, the sound of his labored breathing echoing painfully loudly. "But it is not just my heart failing. They are helping it fail." Ashley gasped, crawling forward on the grass. "Who?" she cried out to the speaker. "Dad, who is helping it fail." "Barbara and Ashley," he answered, as if replying directly to her. "I have known for weeks. I hired a new private investigator after my first minor heart flutter in August. He installed hidden cameras in my study and the master suite. I have been watching the footage on my tablet when they think I am asleep." My mother let out a horrific wail, covering her face with her hands. No, she sobbed, collapsing back against the porch railing. No, he promised he would not record the cameras. He promised. You knew about the cameras, I demanded, staring at the pathetic woman cowering before me. What did you do? The recording answered for her. They have been hiding my nitroglycerin pills. William confessed, his voice barely more than a strained whisper. Whenever I have an angina attack and ask for my medication, Barbara tells me she needs to go to the pharmacy. She leaves me alone in the room, gasping for air for hours. Sometimes she just sits in the armchair across from my bed and watches me struggle. Ashley let out a piercing scream, pressing her hands over her ears. Mom, tell me he is lying, she begged hysterically. Tell me you did not do that. She did it. William continued, his voice devoid of any warmth. And you helped her, Ashley. I watched the footage of you coming into my room while I was sleeping and deliberately turning off the alarm on my oxygen concentrator. You told Barbara you were just tired of hearing it beep. You both thought I was just a senile old man who would not notice. You wanted the trust money so badly you were willing to accelerate my death to get it. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Ashley's horrified sobbing and the ragged breathing from the speaker. The gravity of what William had just revealed was staggering. This was not just a dispute over a $4 million estate. This was not just a case of forged signatures and offshore accounts. This was medical neglect. It was calculated domestic abuse. I have forwarded all the security footage and a sworn medical affidavit to my private investigator. William stated, his voice growing weaker by the second. He has instructions to release everything to the authorities if my death is deemed suspicious. I am too tired to fight them anymore. I am just so tired. Sydney, if you hear this, I am sorry I could not protect you from the ugly truth. Stay far away from them. They are not a family, they are a poison. The recording ended with a final soft click. This time there was no second track. I stared at my mother. The woman who had spent 15 years treating me like an unwanted burden, calling my career a glorified calculator job, and trying to throw me out on the street. She had not just tried to steal my home. She had systematically tortured the only man who had ever truly loved me. She had watched him suffocate in his own bed so she could fund her fake country club lifestyle and her sons-in-law's fraudulent tech startup. Ashley was vomiting into the manicured bushes, the realization of her own complicity physically rejecting itself from her body. She had turned off his oxygen. She had traded her father's breath for peace and quiet. My mother did not try to deny it. She did not try to explain. She simply slid down the wooden railing of the porch until she was sitting on the floorboards, her head resting on her knees, trembling like a cornered animal. The facade was completely gone. There was no arrogant widow left. There was only a murderer, waiting for the consequences to arrive. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered on the first ring. 911, what is your emergency? The calm voice asked through the earpiece. Before I could even speak, my mother snapped. The realization that she was about to face a murder charge, or at the very least a felony manslaughter indictment, finally broke the last remaining shreds of her sanity. She scrambled up from the wooden floorboards of the porch, her eyes completely wild and unhinged. She lunged at me. She did not look like a refined, wealthy suburban widow anymore. She looked like a feral animal fighting for its life. "Give me that phone," Barbara screamed, her hands clawing desperately at the air. "Give me the speaker. It is a lie. He made it up." I stepped smoothly to the right, easily dodging her clumsy attack. Her momentum carried her forward and she crashed hard into the wooden railing. But she did not stop. She spun around and focused her manic energy on the leather briefcase resting on the porch. She grabbed the black Bluetooth speaker I had just placed back inside. She raised the speaker above her head and hurled it down onto the stone pathway with all her might. The plastic casing shattered instantly, the internal wiring and battery pack spilling out across the pavement. She stomped on the broken pieces with her designer heels, crushing the microchips into the dirt, as if physically destroying the speaker would magically erase the audio file from existence. There she panted, her chest heaving violently. Her perfectly styled hair was a disheveled mess sticking to the sweat on her forehead. "It is gone. You have no proof, Sydney. No one is going to believe you. You recorded that yourself. You hired an actor to mimic his voice. I will tell the police you are trying to frame me." I watched her stomp on the plastic fragments, and I felt a profound sense of pity for her sheer ignorance. The dispatcher was still on the line, asking me to state my emergency. "Yes, hello," I said into the receiver, keeping my voice perfectly calm and steady. "I need police assistance at my residence. I am the trustee of an estate, and my family members are currently trespassing and acting violently. There is also an ongoing federal investigation involving the individuals present." I gave the dispatcher the address and hung up, slipping the phone safely into my coat pocket. My mother was still staring at the broken pieces of the speaker. "You really do not understand how technology works, do you, Barbara?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You just destroyed a $200 piece of generic audio equipment. The file itself is securely backed up on 3 different encrypted cloud servers." She froze her foot, hovering over a cracked piece of plastic. And more importantly, I continued, taking a step closer to her so she could hear every single syllable clearly. "You think I brought this information out today just to gloat? I am a forensic accountant. I build airtight cases before I ever step into a room with a suspect. I received the audio file and the security footage directly from William's private investigator 3 days ago." Ashley, who had finally stopped vomiting and was wiping her mouth with the sleeve of her ruined sweater, looked up in absolute horror. 48 hours ago, I delivered physical and digital copies of that exact audio recording, along with the private investigator's comprehensive report, and all the hidden camera footage, directly to the district attorney, I revealed. I also sent copies to the Homicide Division of the Chicago Police Department. They have been reviewing the footage of you hiding his medication and Ashley turning off his oxygen machine for 2 solid days. My mother let out a high-pitched whining sound like a deflating balloon. "The police are not coming here just to escort you off the property for trespassing," I explained, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "They are coming to arrest you. I did not play that recording to warn you. I played it so you would know exactly why you are going to spend the rest of your natural life in a federal penitentiary. I wanted you to know that William got the last word." "You are lying," Barbara whispered violently, shaking her head. "You could not have done that. If you think I am lying, I suggest you run," I told her, pointing toward the driveway. "You might make it to the highway before the squad cars arrive." Ashley collapsed onto her side on the grass, sobbing. "Mom, we are going to jail!" Ashley wailed, her voice echoing loudly. "We killed him! We actually killed him!" "Just shut up!" my mother screamed, turning to run away in blind, total panic. My mother took 2 frantic steps across the manicured grass before a deep rumbling sound echoed down the quiet suburban street. It was not the high-pitched wail of a local police siren. It was the heavy, synchronized hum of large engines approaching at a rapid speed. Before Barbara could even reach the edge of the property line, 3 massive matte black SUVs swerved aggressively into our gravel driveway. Their tires crunched loudly as they parked at sharp angles, completely barricading the exit. Jamal's sports car was long gone, but my mother was now trapped with nowhere to run. The heavy doors of the SUVs swung open simultaneously. Men and women stepped out, moving with a precise military efficiency that instantly froze my mother in her tracks. They were not wearing the standard blue uniforms of the Chicago Police Department. They wore dark tactical pants and navy blue windbreakers. As they turned, I could clearly see the bold yellow letters printed across their backs. FBI and IRSCI. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division had officially arrived at the estate. Ashley let out a terrified whimper, burying her face in the grass. My mother stumbled backward, clutching her chest, her eyes darting between the armed agents and the blocked driveway. "What is this?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are they here?" I walked slowly down the wooden steps of the porch, my leather briefcase securely in my hand. You really thought I spent the entire night just printing out a single report for a regional bank manager? I asked her, my voice cutting through the hum of the idling engines. I am a certified forensic accountant, Barbara. When I uncover a massive web of financial crimes, I do not just stop at stopping a foreclosure. I have a legal and ethical obligation to report federal offenses to the proper authorities. A tall, imposing agent with silver hair and a stern expression began walking up the driveway, unhooking a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. Two other agents flanked him, their hands resting cautiously on their holstered weapons. "You see, Barbara," I continued, keeping my eyes locked on her terrified face, "I did not just find the forged mortgage documents. When I dug into the financial history of this house, I realized you have been skimming money from William's business accounts for the past 7 years. You funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into offshore accounts to avoid paying federal taxes so you could afford your endless spa vacations and designer wardrobes. Tax evasion is a serious federal crime." The lead agent stopped a few feet away from my mother. "Barbara William," he stated, his voice echoing with absolute authority, "we have a federal warrant for your arrest." My mother shook her head frantically, holding her hands up in a desperate plea. "No, you do not understand," she babbled, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. "My son-in-law Jamal did it. He stole the money for his startup. I am just a widow. I do not know anything about taxes or shell companies." The agent did not even blink. "We are well aware of Jamal and his shell company J&M Holdings," the agent replied coldly. In fact, a separate team of federal agents intercepted Jamal at O'Hare International Airport exactly 20 minutes ago. He was attempting to board a flight to the Maldives with a woman named Mia. He is currently in federal custody. Ashley let out another gut-wrenching sob at the mention of her husband's mistress. Her entire life was being dismantled, broadcasted and prosecuted, all in the span of a single morning. "You and Jamal left a digital footprint so massive a first-year accounting student could have tracked it," I told my mother. "I compiled every wire transfer, every fake invoice, and every forged signature into a comprehensive whistleblower report. I submitted it directly to the IRS and the FBI Cybercrimes Division. They move incredibly fast when they are handed a perfectly wrapped gift of felony tax evasion and wire fraud." "But the local police," my mother stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She called 911. She said the local police were coming." "The local police are on their way to secure the scene because you trespassed and destroyed property," I clarified smoothly. "But the federal agents are here because you stole $1 million and committed federal fraud. And as soon as the homicide detectives review the medical neglect footage from the district attorney, you are going to have a lot more than tax evasion to worry about." The lead agent reached out and firmly grasped my mother's wrist, twisting her arm behind her back with practiced ease. "Barbara William, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, tax evasion, and aggravated identity theft." He recited, the metal handcuffs clicking sharply around her wrists. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." My mother let out a loud, agonizing wail as the cold steel locked into place. The arrogant matriarch who had tried to throw me out of my own home the night before was now standing on the lawn in handcuffs, her perfect life completely annihilated by her own greed. I stood on the driveway and watched as the agents began to pull her toward the waiting black SUVs. The silver-haired agent held Barbara firmly by her bicep. "You have the right to an attorney." He continued, his voice a calm monotone that contrasted sharply with my mother's frantic hyperventilating. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Hearing those words spoken on the manicured lawn of our affluent suburban estate was surreal. Neighbors had started stepping out onto their front porches, drawn by the commotion and the flashing lights of the federal vehicles. The women my mother usually played tennis with were now watching her get dragged across the gravel in handcuffs. Another agent, a tall woman with a heavy tactical vest and a clipboard, stepped forward to clarify the exact nature of the nightmare Barbara was entering. "Barbara William, you are being taken into federal custody under a multi-agency indictment," the female agent announced, her voice projecting clearly for the entire street to hear. The federal charges include, but are not limited to felony tax evasion, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Furthermore, based on evidence submitted to the district attorney by your daughter, you are also being charged with felony elder abuse resulting in death. The words resulting in death hit my mother like a physical blow. Her knees buckled instantly. The agents had to grip her arms tighter to hold her upright and prevent her from collapsing onto the crushed remains of the Bluetooth speaker she had just destroyed. No, my mother wailed, thrashing her shoulders in a futile, pathetic attempt to break free from the federal agents. I did not kill him. It was just his heart. It was just his heart. Ashley, tell them. My mother twisted her neck violently, searching frantically for her golden child. Ashley was still sitting on the damp grass. She had stopped vomiting, but she was completely paralyzed by shock. Her designer sweater was stained with dirt and bile. Her perfectly manicured hands were shaking uncontrollably as she stared at the woman who had raised her. Ashley, get up! My mother shrieked, the panic in her voice reaching a fever pitch. Call our lawyer right now! Call the estate attorney! Do not just sit there like an idiot! Help your mother! Ashley did not move a single muscle to help. She just stared at Barbara, her eyes wide with terror and a dawning realization of her own complicity. Ashley finally understood that the protective bubble of wealth and privilege they had lived in was entirely fabricated. It was funded by fraud and sustained by medical murder. She shook her head, slowly backing away on the grass. I cannot, Ashley whispered, her voice cracking into a pathetic sob. You killed him. You made me help you kill him. I am not going to jail for you. The betrayal from her favorite daughter shattered the last ounce of my mother's fight. She went completely limp, sobbing hysterically as the agents dragged her toward the open door of the central SUV. Before they shoved her into the back seat, my mother made one final desperate play for someone else to take the fall. Jamal has the money, she cried out to the silver-haired agent, her voice hoarse and desperate. He is the one you want. He manipulated me into doing it. Go find Jamal. The lead agent paused, resting his hand on the roof of the SUV. He looked down at my mother with absolute disgust. I already told you, Mom, the agent replied coldly. Jamal is not a fugitive. He is in federal custody as we speak. He did not even make it past the TSA security checkpoint at Terminal 5. The female agent looked over at Ashley, delivering the final piece of the devastating puzzle. Your husband attempted to board an international flight to the Maldives exactly 45 minutes ago, the agent explained. He was accompanied by a female companion identified as Mia. He had 2 suitcases packed with designer clothing and a briefcase containing $50,000 in undeclared cash. When the airport police apprehended him at the boarding gate, he immediately offered to testify against both of you in exchange for federal immunity. Ashley let out a hollow gasp. Jamal had not just abandoned her on the lawn. He had packed bags with his mistress and actively tried to trade his wife and mother-in-law for a get-out-of-jail-free card. He was the ultimate coward, exactly as Barbara described. Move, the agent ordered, pushing my mother firmly into the back seat of the SUV. The heavy doors slammed shut with a definitive metallic thud that signaled the absolute end of her reign. The matte black federal vehicles reversed out of the driveway in perfect synchronization, leaving nothing but deep tire tracks in the crushed gravel. I stood on the porch and watched them disappear down the quiet suburban street, taking my mother's arrogant facade away forever. The flashing lights faded into the distance, and the neighborhood slowly began to quiet down. But the nightmare was not over for everyone. Ashley was still on the lawn. She had not moved from the spot where she collapsed. Her hands were buried in the damp grass, and she was staring blankly at the empty space where the SUVs had just been. She looked completely shattered. The golden child, the perfect daughter, the influencer who had mocked me just an hour ago, was now a woman with absolutely nothing. Her followers had already turned on her during the live stream. Her husband had tried to flee the country with his mistress. Her mother was facing murder and fraud charges. The lead bank representative, who had wisely retreated to the edge of the property during the FBI raid, slowly walked back up the driveway. He was holding a fresh clipboard and a ring of heavy plastic zip ties used for securing asset tags. He did not look intimidated anymore. He looked like a man with a job to do. "Mrs. Ashley," he said, his voice clipped and entirely devoid of the customer service warmth he had used earlier. "We just received the official federal seizure mandate regarding J&M Holdings and all affiliated personal accounts." Ashley slowly looked up, her eyes red and vacant. What she whispered. "Because your husband utilized fraudulent funds to collateralize his business and personal lines of credit, the federal government has initiated an immediate asset freeze," the representative explained, reading directly from his clipboard. "This includes the joint checking accounts, the business credit cards, and the platinum travel cards registered in your name. As of this exact moment, any card you possess will be declined." Ashley shook her head weakly. "No," she mumbled, reaching into her designer purse and pulling out a thick silver credit card. "No, my mom gave me this one. It is a family card. Your mother funded that account using equity stolen from this estate," the representative corrected her bluntly. "That account is also locked. Furthermore, the white luxury SUV you drove here today is leased under Jamal's Frozen LLC. We are required to seize the vehicle immediately. I need the keys, Mrs. Ashley." Ashley stared at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. "You cannot take my car," she protested, her voice rising in panic. "How am I supposed to get home? How am I supposed to buy groceries? My friends are waiting for me downtown." "Ma'am, your husband is currently in federal custody and your penthouse is part of an active criminal investigation," the representative stated without an ounce of pity. "You do not have a home to go back to. Your influencer friends are not going to pay your bills now that your accounts are seized. I need the keys right now, or I will call a tow truck and have the local police assist with the repossession." The reality of her total, absolute destitution finally crashed down on her. Ashley was 28 years old, and she had never worked a single day in her adult life. She had floated from her mother's wealthy estate to her husband's fraudulent tech company, shielded from consequence by a wall of stolen money. Now that wall had evaporated. She reached into her purse with trembling fingers, pulled out the heavy electronic key fob, and dropped it into the bank, representative's outstretched hand. He nodded, tagged the keys, and walked toward her car, without another word, leaving her stranded. Ashley turned to look at me. I was still standing on the porch holding my briefcase. I had watched her entire life dismantle in the span of a single morning. She slowly pushed herself up from the damp grass, her designer clothes ruined, her perfect hair a tangled mess. She walked toward the wooden steps, moving like a ghost, dragging her feet across the driveway. "Sydney," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Sydney, please." She reached the bottom of the steps and her legs gave out entirely. She dropped to her knees on the hard stone pathway, looking up at me with an expression of sheer, desperate terror. The arrogance was completely gone. The mocking tone she had used at the dinner table last night was completely erased from her vocabulary. "I have nowhere to go," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "Jamal left me. Mom is gone. My cards are dead. I do not have a single dollar to my name. Please, Sydney. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything. I did not know about the medication, I swear. I just turned off the alarm because it was loud. I did not know she was killing him. I did not speak. I just looked down at her, examining the pathetic sight of my former bully, begging for mercy. "Please," Ashley begged, clasping her hands together in front of her chest, practically groveling at my feet. "Just let me stay here. I will not come into the main house. I will not bother you. You can have the master suite. You can have the whole house. Just please let me sleep in the garage, the one you were going to take. Please, Sydney, I have nowhere else to sleep tonight." She was literally begging for the exact same scraps she had cruelly offered me just 12 hours ago. I looked down at the weeping woman kneeling on the hard stone pathway. This was the same sister who had spent her entire life walking over me to get exactly what she wanted. The same sister who had live-streamed my attempted eviction just an hour ago, hoping to monetize my humiliation for her followers. Now her phone was lying forgotten in the damp grass, her designer sweater was ruined, and her perfect life was entirely dismantled. She was begging to sleep in the detached garage she had mockingly told me to accept. "Ashley, please," I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of any warmth. "Do not humiliate yourself any further. It is pathetic." Ashley reached out, grabbing the hem of my coat with trembling fingers. "Sydney, I have no money." She choked out her tears, leaving tracks through the dirt on her face. "You do not understand. My accounts are frozen. My car is gone." Jamal took whatever cash we had and tried to run away. "I do not even have a way to buy a cup of coffee right now. I am your sister. You cannot just leave me out here on the street. Dad would not want you to do this to me." I stepped back, pulling the fabric of my coat out of her grasp. I stared at her, feeling an absolute profound sense of emptiness. "You do not get to invoke his name, Ashley," I told her sharply. "Not after what you did. You crept into his room while he was struggling to breathe, and you turned off his oxygen alarm because it annoyed you. You helped our mother torture him to death so you could get your hands on his money faster. Do not ever speak his name to me again." "I was just following Mom," she sobbed violently, wrapping her arms around her own stomach as if she were in physical pain. "I did not know she was actually killing him. I just thought she was trying to get him to sleep. I was stupid, Sydney. I was so stupid and selfish, but I am not a murderer. Please, you have to believe me. I am family. We share the same blood." "Blood does not mean anything to me," I replied coldly. "You made sure of that when you stood there and watched Barbara wave that DNA test in my face. You were perfectly happy to watch me lose my inheritance, my home, and my family name. You laughed about it. You recorded it. You wanted me destroyed. The only reason you are crying right now is because you got caught and your husband abandoned you. You are not sorry for what you did to our father. You are just sorry you do not have a platinum credit card anymore." The lead bank representative cleared his throat, stepping forward with his clipboard. "Mrs. Ashley." He interrupted, his tone completely professional and unsympathetic. "I am going to have to ask you to vacate the premises immediately. The trustee has made it clear that you are not welcome here, and if you continue to loiter, we will be forced to contact local law enforcement to process a formal trespassing charge." Ashley looked from the bank representative to me, her eyes wide with sheer panic. She realized the ultimate truth. There was no safety net left. I was the only person standing between her and total destitution, and I was not going to move an inch to catch her. I adjusted the grip on my leather briefcase and looked her dead in the eye. "I am going to give you the exact same advice you gave me last night at the dinner table," I said, enunciating every word with perfect clarity. "Just take the consequences and be grateful. At least you still have a roof over your head, somewhere in a federal holding cell." I did not wait for her to respond. I turned my back on her, leaving her kneeling in the dirt. I walked up the remaining wooden steps, my heels clicking sharply against the wood. I reached out and grabbed the heavy brass handle of the front door. The massive oak door swung open, revealing the warm, quiet interior of my $4 million estate. The house finally felt clean. Sydney Ashley screamed behind me, her voice tearing through the morning air in a final desperate plea. I did not look back. I stepped inside the grand foyer, pulled the heavy oak door shut behind me, and firmly turned the deadbolt. The loud metallic click echoed through the empty hallway, a sound of absolute finality. I left her outside on the lawn with the federal agents and the bank representatives, completely locked out of my life forever. 1 month later, I found myself sitting in a sterile, harshly lit room that smelled faintly of industrial bleach and stale sweat. The journey from the sprawling $4 million suburban estate to the Chicago Metropolitan Correctional Center was a sharp, jarring contrast. I sat rigidly on a bolted metal stool, staring straight ahead at a thick pane of smudged plexiglass. The heavy steel door on the opposite side of the glass clanked loudly, swinging open to admit the prisoners designated for the morning visitation block. My mother walked into the room. It took me a moment to fully register that the woman shuffling toward the partition was indeed Barbara. The transformation was absolute and devastating. Her perfectly dyed and styled hair had grown out, revealing stark gray roots. Her face, stripped of the expensive cosmetics and chemical peels she relied on, looked hollow and deeply aged. She was swimming in a standard-issue khaki prison jumpsuit that highlighted how much weight she had lost in just 4 weeks. The arrogant, vicious matriarch, who had tried to throw me out of my own home, was completely gone. In her place was a broken, terrified inmate. She sat down heavily on the metal stool opposite me, her shoulders slumped, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the black telephone receiver mounted on the wall. I picked up my receiver, holding it to my ear. The line crackled with static. "Sydney," she whispered, her voice cracking instantly. "Oh God, Sydney, thank you for coming. I did not think you would actually come." I did not offer a greeting, I just looked at her waiting. She pressed her free hand against the smudged plexiglass, as if she desperately wanted to reach through and touch me. "It is a nightmare in here," she sobbed, the tears flowing freely down her pale cheeks. "It is absolute hell. The food is inedible. The noise never stops. I share a cell with a woman who screams at the walls all night. I cannot sleep. I cannot breathe. You have to get me out of here. Please, you have to help me." I kept my voice perfectly level. "You are currently awaiting federal trial for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, tax evasion, aggravated identity theft, and felony elder abuse resulting in death. Barbara, the federal prosecutor is pushing for a maximum sentence. The judge deemed you a flight risk due to your offshore accounts. Getting you out is not exactly a simple administrative task." I know, she whimpered, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her coarse jumpsuit. "I know my lawyer explained everything, but the judge finally agreed to set bail yesterday. It is high. It is incredibly high because of the flight risk, but if I can post the bond, they will let me out on house arrest until the trial." She leaned closer to the glass, her eyes wide and pleading. "It is $500,000, Sydney. I know that sounds like a lot, but you have the estate. You have the trust fund. You have millions of dollars in liquid assets. You could easily secure a bond for that amount without even making a dent in your portfolio." I let her words hang in the air for a long moment. "You want me to pay $500,000 to bail out the woman who tried to steal my inheritance, frame me for trespassing, and actively participated in the medical neglect of the only father I ever knew." "Sydney, please," she begged, her voice rising in pitch, a desperate whine echoing through the receiver. "I am your mother. I gave birth to you. I carried you for 9 months. You cannot just leave your own mother rotting in a concrete box. I am begging you. I will do whatever you want. I will sign whatever you want. Just pay the bail. Do not let me die in here." I watched her cry. I watched her attempt to use the absolute last weapon she thought she possessed, the biological guilt trip. She genuinely believed that underneath all the hatred, all the abuse, and all the betrayal, there was still a fundamental, unbreakable bond because we shared DNA. She thought the title of mother was a magic word that would somehow erase 33 years of cruelty. She was wrong. I slowly reached into the slim leather portfolio I had brought with me. I did not bring my heavy forensic accounting briefcase today. I only needed a single document to finish this. I pulled out a crisp white envelope and slid it through the narrow metal slot located at the bottom of the plexiglass partition. It pushed through to her side, coming to rest on the metal ledge beneath her elbows. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling as she looked down at the envelope. "Is it the bond paperwork? Did you bring the bond?" I looked directly into her terrified eyes. "No, Barbara," I replied, my voice as cold and unforgiving as the concrete walls surrounding us. "It is the exact opposite." My mother hesitated, her trembling fingers hovering over the crisp white envelope resting on the metal ledge. She looked at me through the smudged plexiglass, her eyes searching my face for any hint of a joke. She desperately wanted to find a sign that I was playing a cruel prank before ultimately handing her a massive cashier check, but she found absolutely nothing in my expression. With a shaking breath, she slowly pulled the flap open and extracted the thick stack of legal papers. The bold black lettering at the top of the first page reflected sharply against the glass. She squinted, reading the header aloud, her voice catching painfully in her throat. "Petition for permanent severance of familial ties and injunction against contact." She looked up, her brow furrowed in utter confusion. "What does this mean?" she asked the telephone receiver, trembling against her ear. I sat perfectly still, keeping my posture rigid and professional. I watched her eyes frantically scan the dense legal text, searching for a loophole that did not exist. You spent the morning of my attempted eviction screaming on the front lawn about how I had no right to William's legacy because I was not his biological daughter, I reminded her, my voice slicing through the static on the line. You thought that faded laboratory envelope was going to be my execution. You thought biology was your ultimate weapon. But you failed to realize that biology is a two-way street. My mother swallowed hard, her eyes darting back down to the papers. Since you so eagerly proved that I am not William's biological child, and William legally disinherited you entirely, there is absolutely no remaining legal or financial bridge connecting us. I explained, breaking down the law with clinical precision. We do not share a father. We do not share an estate. We do not share a trust. And as of this morning, when a federal judge signed that document, we no longer share a recognized familial relationship. I have legally emancipated myself from you. You cannot do this, she gasped, her chest heaving as she struggled to pull oxygen into her lungs. I am your mother. You cannot just legally erase me. I gave birth to you. That is a biological fact, Sydney. You cannot change that with a piece of paper. I leaned closer to the glass, resting my elbows on the cold metal counter. You were a biological incubator, Barbara, I stated with absolute coldness. That is the exact and only title you ever earned. You never acted like a mother. You acted like a warden guarding a vault you did not own. You spent decades trying to make me feel like an unwanted parasite. And now the vault is locked, and you are the one sitting in a cage begging for scraps. You wanted to use DNA to destroy my life, but I am using the federal legal system to permanently excise you from mine like a malignant tumor. My mother dropped the papers onto the metal ledge as if they were physically burning her hands. The tears streamed down her hollow cheeks, ruining the last remnants of her dignity. You see, Barbara, the law is incredibly precise. I continued, my voice relentless. You are currently facing federal prosecution for defrauding my legally appointed trust and contributing to the death of my father. The secondary documents in that packet include a permanent federal restraining order. It bars you from ever contacting me, contacting my legal representatives, or attempting to make any claim against my assets for the rest of your natural life. If you so much as send a handwritten letter to my attorney from your prison cell, it will automatically trigger a violation. She shook her head violently, pressing her free hand against the glass. No, Sydney, please listen to me, she begged, her voice deteriorating into a pathetic whine. You are all I have left. Ashley will not even take my calls. Jamal took a plea deal and is testifying against me. They both abandoned me. You are the only one who can afford the bail. I will die in here. I will not survive a 20-year sentence. You should have thought about survival before you decided to hide a dying man's heart medication, I replied, my tone completely devoid of mercy. You might want to ask your golden child for the bail money. Oh wait, Ashley is currently living in a state-subsidized halfway house after the federal government seized her designer wardrobe and her frozen accounts. She also took a plea deal to testify against you in exchange for avoiding federal prison time. They both threw you under the bus the exact second it benefited them. You raised them perfectly. My mother slammed her fists against the plexiglass, the dull thud echoing loudly in the sterile visitation room. A corrections officer stepped forward from the corner of the room, placing a hand on his heavy utility belt, but I waved him off with a subtle gesture. Sydney, you listen to me, she shrieked, the telephone receiver rattling against her ear as she lost the last shred of her sanity. You owe me. I kept a roof over your head. I paid for your food. You are going to pay this bail, or I swear to God I will tell the press everything. I will ruin your pristine reputation. I will tell the world you stole my house. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I simply felt an overwhelming sense of profound relief. The heavy, suffocating burden I had carried for 33 years was finally lifting off my shoulders. I looked at the pathetic, screaming woman in the khaki jumpsuit and realized she had absolutely no power left. Her threats were entirely empty. She was a ghost screaming into a void. You are legally dead to me, Barbara. I said, my voice perfectly steady and resolute. Enjoy federal prison. But Sydney, I am your— she screamed back, her face contorted in absolute terror and rage. I did not let her finish the sentence. I placed the black receiver back onto the metal hook, severing the connection instantly. The line went dead, cutting off her voice completely. Through the thick glass, I watched her mouth continue to move in a silent, desperate scream. She banged her fists against the partition, sliding down onto her knees as the corrections officer finally stepped forward to physically restrain her. I picked up my leather portfolio, stood up from the metal stool, and walked out of the visitation room without ever looking back. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind me, sealing her fate and securing my absolute permanent victory. The heavy steel door clicking shut behind me at the correctional center was the sound of a chapter permanently closing. I walked out of the prison and stepped into the crisp city air, never looking back. Today, the suffocating scent of industrial bleach and the sight of khaki jumpsuits are nothing but a distant memory, replaced by the sharp, clean smell of sawdust and fresh paint. Sunlight is finally pouring into the massive living room of the estate. For 15 years, this room was a tomb. My mother had decorated it in her own image using heavy velvet curtains, dark mahogany panels, and oppressive Gothic wallpaper that seemed to swallow every ounce of natural light. It was a physical manifestation of her soul, cold, unwelcoming, and designed entirely for superficial display rather than actual warmth. Now the rhythmic pounding of sledgehammers echoes through the space. I stand in the center of the room, holding a rolled-up blueprint, while a crew of contractors systematically tears down the walls Barbara used to love. I watch a massive section of dark wood paneling crash to the floor, exposing the sturdy wooden bones of the house my father built. A cloud of plaster dust catches the bright morning sun, dancing like snow in the fresh air, flowing through the open windows. The house is finally breathing again. And for the first time in my entire life, so am I. I walk over to the fireplace, stepping carefully over the construction debris, and rest my hand on the original stone mantel. William loved this fireplace. He used to sit right here reading his financial journals and telling me that a strong foundation was the only thing that mattered when the storms came. He was right. He built a foundation so strong that even $1 million fraud could not break it. The last month has been an exhausting whirlwind of legal filings, court dates, and asset recovery. The federal prosecutors seized every single thing Jamal and Barbara touched. The downtown penthouse is on the market. The shell companies are completely dissolved. The offshore accounts were swiftly repatriated. And Ashley is learning the harsh reality of minimum wage while living in a state-subsidized halfway house. They spent their entire lives chasing money without any moral compass, and it led them straight into total, absolute ruin. As I watch the contractors carry the last of the oppressive velvet drapes out to the industrial dumpster in the driveway, I realize something profound about the concept of family. Society conditions us to believe that blood is an unbreakable bond. We are constantly told to forgive the unforgivable simply because we share a genetic sequence with our abusers. But William taught me the truth. Family is not DNA. Family is respect. Family is having the courage to set firm boundaries. Family is the relentless protection of the people who actually value your soul. DNA just dictates your height and your eye color. It absolutely does not excuse theft, manipulation, or cruelty. I am not keeping this $4 million estate just to live alone in a massive empty house. William left me his empire because he knew I would not waste it on country club memberships or designer clothes. He knew I would use it as a weapon for good. So I have decided to leverage the equity of this property. I am not funding a fake tech startup. I am opening my own forensic accounting firm right here in downtown Chicago. My firm will not be handling corporate tax returns or standard payroll audits. We are going to specialize entirely in domestic financial abuse. We will take the difficult cases where elderly parents are being quietly drained by greedy children. We will take the cases where spouses hide assets during divorces using complex shell companies. We will track every hidden offshore account, every forged signature, and every stolen dime. I am going to take the exact same skills I used to dismantle Jamal's fraudulent empire, and I am going to use them to protect people who do not know how to fight back against the monsters living inside their own homes. William's legacy will not be defined by the wife who betrayed him. It will be defined by the daughter who fought for him and the countless victims she will save in his name. The contractors turn off their heavy machinery for a lunch break, leaving the sunlit room in a peaceful quiet. I walk over to the massive bay window, looking out over the manicured lawn where my mother and sister threw their final pathetic tantrums. The grass has grown back over the tire tracks left by the federal agents. The property is completely mine. The legacy is completely secure. Have you ever had to use your own career skills to dismantle a toxic family member's lies? Tell me how you protected yourself in the comments below. And remember, the best revenge is not just surviving, it is auditing their lies until there is nothing left.